Well, TGIF, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of In Case You Missed It. Last week, we talked with two CivStart cohort startups that were focused on housing. And as we promised, we're back to talk to two more startups. We're going to look at the future of infrastructure and smart infrastructure in the GovTech space. Joe's also back with us as well after stepping away for a bit to welcome his new daughter into the world. So congrats again on that, Joe. And joining us today, we've got Paul Salama, co-founder and COO of ClearRoad, and Chris Sosnowski, founder and CEO of Waterly. Paul and Chris, thanks so much for stepping out for a few minutes of your day to share what you're working on.
Thanks so much for having us.
All right, so we're going to begin to get today's episode with Paul, and then we're going to transition to Chris. And Paul, we'll go ahead and start and kind of dive into the topic at hand. So first, tell us a little bit about ClearRoad. You know, I know behind a lot of these GovTech companies, there's always a fun inception story. How did transportation end up as your focus area?
Sure. So I have an interesting background. I'm a computer engineer as well as an urban planner. So you don't see that mix, but it's a good one. And actually, I was made the transition to startups about 5 years ago. So I was in a zoning automation startup. Certain segments of your audience might be really excited about that. I certainly was at the time. And I actually started out as an advisor to ClearRoad, where Frederick is coming from my co-founder is coming from the tolling world. So he actually helped build an Easy Pass fast track equivalent in France, so across the entire French highway network. And that work took him to Oregon and the very innovative Origo program.
It's interesting. So, we've seen this in our research, and I'm sure you've seen it over the 5 years that you've been doing this. Funding infrastructure, massive challenge, right? And we look at a typical state or local budget, it ends up being one of the largest slices of that pie. With the activities that you've done specifically with Oregon and their Department of Transportation, where you worked on a road usage charge program for electronic vehicles, can you tell us a little bit more about what you did there and what the results have been?
Sure. It's still ongoing, but Oregon has been a pioneer in the space of alternatives to the gas tax. And just a nice point of reference, the federal gas tax, which is a little over 18 cents at this point, was last changed in 1993, I think is the year. And the value of that gas tax is a third of what it was at that time. So you're getting a third, because of inflation, a whole bunch of other components, you're getting a lot less bang for the buck than you did then. And so this is not a new challenge. This is a well-known challenge. Again, Oregon's been looking for a sustainable funding solution. And then obviously COVID hit, and we're hurting budgets are already further in the toilet. So there's actually lots of states looking at this. And EVs in particular is a really interesting case because most people want additional EVs in in their states. It's a good policy. But what ends up happening with most states, I think about 30 at this point, charge EVs a flat fee on their registration, a surcharge. And that, if you were doing a policy design, that's probably the worst thing that you could do, is charge people upfront for driving that they may or may not do. And so this alternative of a road usage charge is, I think, a really great alternative. Now Oregon was the first state. We're starting to see additional states. Utah is taking the plunge. We're hearing whispers that Wyoming not only wants to do it for electric vehicles, but actually for all vehicles. And Wyoming in particular is really seeing some transportation funding crunch.
Yeah, agencies are going to have to find some creative ways to help pay for the infrastructure and the maintenance of that infrastructure. So one thing that also stood out as we were kind of doing some research beforehand is you have something called Next Gen Tolling, and it's a platform that reduces agencies having to rely on the traditional kind of fixed mounted roadway sensors, and instead it leverages some of the connected vehicle technologies we all have. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Yes, so thanks for asking that. Our premise is that the technologies for tolling or next generation tolling are already in our vehicles. So our smartphones in our pocket, the plug-in devices like for usage-based insurance, like from Metromile, as well as the embedded systems like OnStar, Tesla's smart car technologies, which are probably too numerous to count. at this point, most folks aren't saying that they're not sharing enough data, right? But people say that they are sharing their data in plenty of ways. So we just want to capture a small portion of that, and kind of turn the industry on its head and make it a car-based infrastructure as opposed to a roadside-based infrastructure. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But we do, so on the tolling front, we do have a white labeled app, so agencies, authorities can can plug it in and just say, okay, well, this is the SunPass SunPass tolling app. That is an alternative if you're potentially an infrequent user. A really great use case there. But what I'm most excited about is once you get out of that mindset of this kind of zero-dimensional or one-dimensional tolling mindset where you can only do linear, you can only charge linearly, basically, for linear distance. But what happens if you broaden that to 2 dimensions, or kind of multi-dimensional, like emissions or HOV, number of passengers? How could you integrate that in a more interesting fashion once you've made that transition to digital?
So another thing that stood out to us in our research is you've leveraged your platform to create a truck management and permitting solution for cities that are struggling with regulating the freight sector. Can you share a little bit about your work there?
Sure. So we actually kind of fell into that work. We were working as part of the STIR program, the Startup in Residence program, and we were working with the city of Fremont, kind of co-developing this product where they have a very paper-based process to manage oversized and overweight trucks. And so these are, in California in particular, you have a permitting process that is done at the city level or the county level, which says if you are an oversized, overweight truck, so that you don't damage the infrastructure on the road, alongside the road, you need to get a permit and understand which what roads you're allowed to take, so that you do not destroy the infrastructure. So there's actually a really nice synergy with the road pricing work that we do, as well as kind of automating enforcement. But there is an interesting COVID story. So basically, City of Fremont wanted to do a soft launch of our digital platform, and let me describe that a little bit further. But basically, again, taking a process where you are a vehicle owner, or excuse me, a large truck owner. You have to call the Department of Public Works to say, I want to drive, down this road or this road. I want to deliver to this location. So you have to fill out a form, you fax it in, you or PDF, scan a PDF. You write out in long form what turns you're going to take, and then they approve it. Then they look at, take that piece of paper, look at a map, and say, okay, this works, this doesn't work. So ripe for innovation, but it's a little bit of a small segment, interestingly. So we digitized the entire process. We gave the applicants a form, as well as the municipalities a form to manage, and then mapping interface to allow this kind of automated routing. But was really interesting. Oh yeah, and then the last part is on the enforcement side. We gave an interface for police officers to enforce this. So basically, as opposed on their end, they have to look at a truck to say this truck shouldn't be here. Which they didn't really have a good reference point for. They have to call up the Department of Public Works to say, okay, does this truck have a valid permit? And then then they have to look through a paper filing cabinet, which is that was the status quo, and it probably is the status quo for lots of cities in the state of California. But yeah, so just quick thing in the COVID landscape. So we had just we were just put in place in the beginning of March of this year. So really, it was kind of a soft launch, and then California stay-at-home order for all agencies, all departments, and basically they said, okay, we're going to ramp this up. We're going to turn this on fully for everything, and we were the only, and basically we ended up being the only service that worked out of the box for the city. So everything else was somebody had to log in through a VPN, or there just wasn't a way to access a city service. So that's a really some good feedback there.
That's great. So I know COVID changed a lot of things in our space. It accelerated a lot of, modernization of some of these old processes that you talked about. Love to kind of get your take on where you see the future of transportation headed, but also, more importantly, those transportation officials that are listening in, what should be on their radar for 2021?
Yeah, and apologies if you can hear my crying daughter in the background. Yeah, so I take a pretty broad view, and I think this is the urban planner in me. Funding, is one problem. Congestion is another problem. Climate change is another problem. There's generally the procurement processes, government processes are set up to solve one problem at a time. You procure for a single solution at a time. In the urban planning, urban transportation space, congestion pricing is the kind of pinnacle of roadway management and funding. But they don't end up. It doesn't end up being implemented in a holistic fashion. And so New York is probably going to be the first in the country. But the only requirement of that system in New York is to fund transit. I'm not going to knock funding transit; it's great, but in terms of a public process of integrating equity, in terms of integrating emissions reduction, that this was absolutely not part of it. And it will have those benefits, but it's not going to be in a targeted fashion. So I just came across this term MultiSolving, which is basically, as you might understand from the combination of words, is trying to solve multiple things at the same time. And if we take Uber mobility as a service as a model on the private side for how you can achieve multiple things at the same time, how you can price different things at the same time, I think there's a lot to be learned there. So if you take an Uber ride, they're going to charge you based on the distance, the time of the ride, some multiplier of demand, so a surge pricing. But they'll also charge you an airport fee. They'll also charge you a regional fee. So there's this bill of items that you trust, right? They have a calculation. You say, okay, I understand these various things, these various components, and and here's my total at the bottom. And at some points, sometimes sometimes the bill, you don't even see those items until after the fact. And so you're just getting the end line price. So I think that there's a interesting model for cities or governments to look at that, to say, okay, can we actually do a road usage fee? So the fee based on the contribution to wear and tear on the road. Can we do those externalities of congestion, emissions? Can we have incentives for greener vehicles? Can we have incentives for high occupancy vehicles? And once you've moved from the infrastructure from being on the roadside to being in the vehicle, you can achieve lots of those things. So I didn't get into Origo as much as probably should have, but basically how it works is, if you're an EV driver in the state of Oregon, or actually previously was included gas vehicles as well, you can sign up for this road usage charge program. And if you were an ICE vehicle owner, you get a plug-in device, so there's an OBD2 port, basically standard for any car since 1996. And through that device, we either record the mileage, or in certain cases, the GPS as a kind of secondary source. And we then calculate a per mile fee. So I think it's 18 cents per mile in the state of Oregon at this point. Presumably that will increase a bit over time. But using those devices, those plug-in devices, we are able to understand the make and model of a vehicle, and as well as the gas consumption. So we can say, we're actually going to refund you the amount of gas tax that we've calculated that you were paying in the state of Oregon. So that is a long-winded way of saying these are the types of things that we can calculate already. We're already doing this. We just need the green light to do more. We want to be able to charge a little bit extra for, again, for those gas guzzlers. If you're driving an F-150 versus a Chevy Volt, that mileage maybe shouldn't cost the same. Shouldn't be the same. Yes. So I hope I answered that question. I think I certainly can go a lot deeper on that as well. But
no, we absolutely appreciate it. Well done. It's always hard to pull out that crystal ball and predict the future, but thank you for sharing your outlook. Where can our audience find a little bit more information about your company?
Sure. We are at ClearRoad.io. That's a really great place to find some information. We're also, you can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, if you can find links on the website, as well as Medium. Medium is probably the best place to get some more of those kind of future thoughts that I have.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Paul. Well, Chris, I want to bring you into the conversation now because we are talking about the future of infrastructure, and water and wastewater infrastructure is a big component here, and also, you know, a level of the industry that hasn't really been modernized, and people are continuing to still do a lot of the things that they've done for years, but you're really looking at tackling this in new ways with Waterly. So I guess first question for you, when did you start, and what kind of problem are you looking at tackling?
Yeah, thanks, Joe and Dustin, for having me on. I've enjoyed a lot of your guys' other interviews too, so it's an honor to be on with you both. Waterly's been around for about 3 years, and it was born out of a previous role that I held at a technology systems integrator. And the problem we were coming across time and time again is utilities would go through a modernization to adopt SCADA systems, stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. And SCADA is used in water wastewater infrastructure to automate things. And these communities were getting brand new SCADA systems. And at the end of the project, we would see them grab the pencil, the clipboard, and head out into the field. And so these communities, small to large, would have these more modern automation systems, but they were still resorting to pencil and paper to collect data for regulatory reports. And so we saw this time and time again, and we had custom wrote solutions for them. And the custom solutions were being adopted very quickly. We're helping to eliminate paper, streamline time spent on it. And after kind of custom writing it about 10 or 20 times, we kind of realized, well, gee, we should write this once and we should leverage the cloud. So we found a partner that knew software. We brought the knowledge of the water in the industry, and the two agencies married, and we formed Waterly. So basically, we eliminate paper and pencil. We leverage their existing SCADA infrastructure, so we have a smart component to what we do. We have a little widget that we install inside their network. We're able to push that data one way out into Waterly. And so we leverage the IoT, and we help eliminate paper.
That's awesome. So you kind of hit on it a little bit, but how are you seeing agencies manage their water today? And why, in the era of COVID and this pandemic, does that no longer work?
Well, all you have to do is say, pass the clipboard back and forth. And I think that says a lot. Most of Waterly's users use their own devices. So agencies are able to interoperate with each other without physical touch. So, and I think a lot of people make the assumption that the average Anytown USA has all this technology at their disposal. But what Waterly did is we really brought that about 10 times less expensive. So whereas you had to be a super large agency and pay for a huge data management study by an engineering firm and wait 3 years and spend $500,000, now they can get it done in about 2 weeks, spending a few grand. So that was sort of the COVID impact for what we did, is we just kind of said, well, we already have the feature. You don't need to see each other. You don't need to hand off data to each other. And plus, Waterly is like a real-time data management system. So when one user is entering data over here, the other person can be there and just have it up on their screen, and they can see stuff exchanged. And I think the answer of how are agencies managing their data right now, it's largely by spreadsheet. So like many other businesses, people revert back to the Google Sheets or Excel, and they're managing it in there. And I have a quick story to tell. We recently pulled in a medium-sized water agency outside of Chicago, a municipality outside of Chicago. And during the demo, I had asked them, I said, well, tell me how you guys are managing your data right now. And he screen shared, and he showed me a folder that he had. And he said, this is about 3 years worth of data. and there were 367 spreadsheets in that folder. And he said, when somebody asks me a question like, can you summarize water data for the last couple of years? He says it usually takes, excuse me, few hours. I've got to open up 30, 40 spreadsheets. I got to copy and paste, and then I deliver the results via email. And so they went from about, 5 spreadsheets a month down to 0. So that's kind of a good example of how we do that.
Yeah, we want our audience to avoid the folders of spreadsheets. So
yes.
So I think it would be interesting to kind of get your thoughts on this too. But what kind of benefits can agencies realize when they create this single source for water and wastewater data? And any notable examples that stand out of agencies that are using your technology and getting some really great benefits out of it?
Yeah, well, I've been in water for more than 20 years, and so obviously there's a lot of different aspects of managing data. But I'm just curious, do you guys drink water?
Of course.
Is it legal for me to ask you questions? And outside of your young children, do you regularly flush the toilet? So, these are things that everyone deals with. And so, agencies usually are solving these problems in a very siloed manner. So they see, okay, I have to come up with a non-revenue water report because it's now mandatory. And so I have to figure out how much water did I produce and how much water did I sell and what's the difference between those. And so they will tackle that problem with focus. And if you go on, you Google that problem, you'll download an Excel template that'll teach you how to do that. So every agency that we've ever come across is managing that problem in Excel, or they might have some enterprise solution that they've paid $500,000 for that is elegantly solving that problem. So agency after agency sees these problems as very siloed. But the simple truth is, whether it's a gallon of water in your kitchen sink or a gallon of water you're flushing down the toilet, it's still a gallon of water. And so we account for water the same way a bookkeeper would account for dollars. We keep track of it through its life cycle, and we treat it like not only data, but we treat it like a gallon too. So, so whether they're managing non-revenue water or whether they're managing wastewater effluent reports too, and so those reports go to separate agencies and that, but we keep it all in one kind of warehouse for them. And I think that the other notable examples is we've got agencies that have software that solves these independent problems for them. And whether it's a spreadsheet or not, they've used multiple different tools. Well, we're kind of that single warehouse for them. And one of the things that's unique about us is we don't charge per user. We charge per gallon. So that really puts our money where our mouth is. And so the larger agencies pay more for the product based on their ability to pay, but we are unbelievably affordable for the rural US utility that has less than 1,000 customers. And we usually onboard them in days. And it's a very affordable for whether you're a small or whether you're a large agency, because we recognize that our value is tied to the value of that gallon. And so we actually charge. Now, we don't have a meter. We don't literally charge them per gallon, but we just look at the size of the system and size it appropriately too.
So earlier you talked about how it's someone's job to kind of go jurisdiction or place to place with that paper and clipboard. It's tough in the public sector to implement new technologies and bring about change that changes someone's job. How do you work within your organization with the organizations that you work with to either navigate that change, to facilitate a smooth transition within those employees, and what training, if any, is required?
Joe, that is a very astute question from somebody that knows government. Well, I think the first thing is, when we built the software, we call it ridiculously simple. And I think one of the things that we get to say to people is, number one, we've never had a single customer uninstall us. So we're making change happen, and we have no customers that aren't water and wastewater utilities. So that by itself is a good testimony to how we build it. But we don't have, they ask us for help documents, and we say, well, you don't need it. If you build an app nowadays that's so complicated, you need a manual, that's 187 pages, you don't want to do it. So these are simple, good people that run water and wastewater utilities. So you have to build it simple. And I think a lot of them are used to the traditional software approach where you buy a shrink wrap piece of software, you hit next, 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 you hit finish, and then you hit the help documents within 30 seconds because you don't know how to do something. I mean, they know how to use Waterly within 30 seconds of seeing the app. In fact, I tell them, have you seen the demo? And they say, yeah. And I said, then you can use the software. Now that's a little bit of an exaggeration because you've got to learn how to configure things. And we do have security that they have to learn how to log in. But we try to make that transition easy just by fact that the software was actually built after surveying 100 utilities of what they wanted the software to do. So we didn't come to the battle, with a tank when it should have been a knife. We asked them what they wanted the knife to do, and we built it for them. So usually people just kind of organically fall into the software and they figure out how to use it. I think the other thing is our beachhead market was we only sold to utilities that served less than 1,000 customers. So our first 12 customers were all teeny tiny utilities where they just had one person. And we gave that demo to the one person, and when it didn't work the way he wanted to him, we changed the software and we made it to work for him. And so when you have an entry into a market using one of the most complicated, hard to sell customers, and these are people that have been doing it for 30, 40, or 50 years, and you build the software to work for them, it's a lot easier to build it for a more sophisticated customer. And besides, anyone that's a millennial or Gen Z, they just tap the app, they log in, they know what they're doing. But a lot of the change that we try to implement is for that older generation. We recognize the value in that because those people, a lot of them are retiring soon, and we want to capture that knowledge so that whether it's them, the knowledge from them, or the input from the young staff, that they have that.
Yeah, I think that's great. A very customer-centric approach. So now let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, and that's reporting. And we know reporting sucks, and it's problematic. We've got a lot of things we can print on mugs, and I think that's one that we'll all agree to, that it's very complicated for government agencies to do that. As you mentioned before, there's lots of different agencies, lots of forms of compliance, lots of different reporting institutions that these agencies have to, they're held accountable by. And so I'd love to kind of get your take on how aggregating and standardizing this data and leveraging Waterly allows them to streamline their reporting and compliance.
Wow, that is a huge question. So water-based compliance reporting is a big deal, and I don't want to bore your listeners with talking about how it works and how it doesn't work, but I think if you said it, I can say it back to you, reporting sucks. I mean, it is such a pain for people, and because it's, the water industry is regulated down from the federal EPA into the state agencies, they have to comply with this. They don't have a choice. So I think there's a ton of reporting solutions out there, and there's lots of products that you can buy and you can stick in to make this. But because we went in to solve a very specific problem of public water and wastewater utility reporting, we have a target that is crystal clear for us. So I guess the other part of your question was how does standardizing and aggregating this help? So one of Waterly's objectives is, if you look at my example of the rural water utilities, you could use it a mid-size or a large utility too. I get my power bill from the power company, and about a year and a half ago, they started sending me a bill that told me what my neighbor's water usage, electrical usage was, and it put a little line on the graph that said, like, you are here and your energy efficient neighbors are here and the power wasters are over here. That showed me the power of aggregating and standardizing data, because everybody measures kilowatt hours. Why don't public water agencies do this? Like, if we have a drought and we have a water shortage or the groundwater table is low, why can't the 10 water agencies that pull from the same aquifer see what everyone's doing? So, and I will tell you, no one's doing it. And when we polled our original 200 customers, 85% of them were using paper, pencil, and Excel, regardless of size. So we forced them all into a standardized data model within Waterly. I think one of my long-term objectives, if any regulators end up listening to this or the like, we love to snap that into the federal emerging kind of electronic data model. Right now, most state agencies take paper or an email of a PDF from their water agencies. And I think everyone is going, really? Yes, really, they do it. So if we can work with the feds to get that data model standardized, and we can work with the states and the utilities to kind of snap that into a common model, you'll have something that looks a little bit more like the power industry, which does have standardized data models and XML, standards for doing that. And I think we can publish that data to give it back to the consumers faster too. Because wouldn't you love to go to your city's website and see how much water they pulled or produced yesterday? That would be really nice. So from the consumer to the regulator to obviously the guy that's managing it, obviously if we save him 10 hours a month of monkeying around with Excel and we give him a one-click button to submit his regulatory report, that's going to benefit everybody in the supply chain from the faucet to the toilet flusher.
That's awesome. Great stuff. Where do we go to find out more, Chris?
Well, just like everyone else, the website is waterlysoftware.com. So you can check that out there, or you can just type Waterly into Google, and we'll be a hit there. And we try to be somewhat active on social media too. So you can we got YouTube videos and things like that. But that's where they can find, or they can reach out to me personally too. So you can go to the website and click on find out more information, and I see all those leads that come in too. So I'd be happy to connect with anybody and chat. And I'll tell you real quick, we are looking for water agencies across the U.S. that are willing to be hand raisers to try out some experimental things with power monitoring, and nothing that impacts their process or their ability to be reliable. So if there are any hand raisers out there that are listening to this to say that I want to make my system more efficient, we'd love to hear from you. So just go to the website and say, I'm interested in being a hand raiser, and there are some good considerations, we'll say, for the hand raisers across the U.S. that want to do this.
Very cool. Well, thank you for taking time out of your day, Chris, to share with us, and Paul, you as well. We appreciate it. Walked away learning more, so that's always fun too. Again, thank you both. And for those of you that are in attendance today, join us next week for an early episode as we recap some of the great things that happened in 2020 and take a look ahead at what's to come next year. Thank you for joining us. Take care.
Thank you, guys.